last Wednesday, a week ago tonight. So it is a pleasure to be here with you tonight to tell you some more tales of the Emerald Isle, and especially the wee folk, the legends that have traveled throughout the world, and some of the symbols that people are very familiar with. I'm giving you a little more background on. We will start with the short history of Ireland, very short history. It was raided by many different nationalities. The Celts were the ones that lived there the longest, and they have an ancient history of their own, and they have a lot of beliefs that tie in with some of the history of the past. Now, one of probably the most famous images of Ireland is the leprechaun. So I'm going to tell you quite a bit about the leprechaun tonight. I will start with the fact that the leprechaun is just one of many different spirits, or fairies, as they actually call them, or shees, or shay. A lot of different variations in dialect in that from the Gaelic for these different creatures, but they are otherworldly creatures. They are immortal. They live beyond our timeline itself, and they have several very responsible jobs to do. Now, the history of the leprechaun are the fallen angels, and they weren't the devils. They were the fallen angels that were fighting against the devil, Satan, and his band of angels. But they were too small, and so they hid during most of the battle, and so they had to be punished afterwards. So they were sent to find a place to live, and the place that they would choose would be where they would have to be for the rest of existence, because they were immortal. But they could not be punished and sent to hell with the devil, because they were fighting against him, although they didn't do much fighting. So they traveled the world and the universe, and they found the most perfect place that would be heaven on earth. And of course, it was Ireland. And that's why the leprechauns inhabit Ireland. Now, they have a very big responsibility. Their main responsibility is to protect the richness of Ireland, literally and figuratively. You see the Danes, who were magnificently raiding and attacking Ireland and other countries as well, stored a lot of their gold from their raiding parties on the island of Ireland. The leprechauns took it and buried it and know where all the gold is. It's their responsibility from that day forward to protect the gold of Ireland and let no one get it, which is an interesting little history behind it. That's why you always see the leprechaun with a pot of gold. He's literally protecting the gold of Ireland that was captured from the Danes when they were conquered ancient centuries ago. Now, the leprechaun, being immortal, is a little bit more than the humans are. And actually, they look down upon humans as foolish creatures. And so one of the things they enjoy doing is, tricking humans, tormenting humans, trying to make humans' lives miserable by showing them what they could have had or what they should have had, and having them live in regret. So that's what a leprechaun does. They're good at several things. They are very good at dancing, playing the fiddle, and making shoes. But there are two other magnificent things they have a talent for, and that is hunting, specifically the fox hunt, and drinking. These are their basic pastimes: playing the fiddle, dancing, and drinking and hunting. When they're working, it's making shoes. So it's hard to find them because they're actually very small creatures as well. Hence the reason they couldn't fight in the battle against the devil, because they were too small. And so they're only about yay big. Some say about the height of your knee. So that would be some people about a foot and a half. If you're extremely tall, they would claim maybe 2 feet. But they can be even smaller than that. And they know where to hide. And they hide down in the grass, under the brush, underneath leaves and mounds of that when they are out exposed amongst people. But for the most, they live in the fairy hills with many of the other fairies that we'll talk about in a little bit. And these fairy hills are mounds throughout Ireland themselves, and they hold magical, mystical powers. The Irish people descendants of the Celt. They believe that there are spirits in everything. They are actually pagans when it is originated. And so they believe these all control different destinies of their life, as it were. And the fairy mounds are very sacred because it's inside there that the fairies live. Many of them are the leprechaun, which also has a cousin called the churichan. There is a division between the two. I'm going to tell you a quick story about that. The leprechaun will trick and deceive you and humiliate you and make your life uncomfortable. But the churichan is even worse. The churichan will go into your house in the dead of night and steal precious things from you. And the most precious thing it loves to steal is your whiskey. Yeah, so it comes in and raids your bar, basically. So if you upset a churichan, they're going to come and they're going to take your elixirs away from you, and that will make you miserable to no end whatsoever. But the leprechaun is what we know most about because they're the ones that are usually exposed more, because the churichan is a little bit more shifty and secretive. Now, it's very hard to find a leprechaun, but you can listen for them. They're singing or the fiddle playing. We'll give them away. And also the pounding when they're nailing the shoes and cobbling the shoes together. So if you listen right and you have the right ear for it, you can find one. And if you find one, you're in luck. They have a great deal of power, but as long as you keep your eye on them, once you've taken control of them, once you've harnessed them, once you have them in your grasp, they can't leave until you are granted the wishes that you desire. But if you take your eye off of them, they're gone like that. So there's fair warning for you. If you do have the luck to find a leprechaun, hold it in your control, either in your hand or tie it up, but don't take your eyes off of it. You take your eyes off of it until you secure it, it is gone whatsoever. Well, my dear friends, I'm going to pretend that you found a leprechaun, and I'm going to tell you something else. They have on them money at all times. Matter of fact, they have two pouches of money. One has a gold coin in it, and the other has a silver coin in it. And if you don't want to play games with them, try and match them out with them, wait to contemplate your wishes, you can simply demand one of those pouches. Matter of fact, a lot of times they will come straight out and offer you and say, "You've caught me. Here, I can give you one of these two pouches. And this one is a gold coin, and this one is a silver coin. Either is yours for desire." And they'll even go as far as to say, this is beyond the wish itself. In other words, they're going to give you one of these two, and then you're still going to have the agreement that you're going to get the three wishes that they're going to so generously give you for capturing them. Don't trust them. They are out to trick you and outwit you at every end because they're immortal. They are way more clever than you are. So maybe you'll think, I know what I'm going to do. I've heard of this. You make your wishes, and then he gives you your wish, but then he makes the wish impossible. Like you wish for a large house, but then you don't have anyone to clean it, or you don't have the money to pay the taxes, or you're given this wish or that wish, and there's always a catch that you didn't think about in your wish. So instead of going for any of that, you're just going to grab the coin and be done with it. So logically, most people would go for the gold coin. I mean, gold's more precious than silver. Yeah, and the leprechaun's counting on that, you see. Now, the truth is, you grab that gold coin from the leprechaun, as soon as you take possession of it, it will either turn into leaves and fall out of your hand, or turn into ashes and fall to the ground. You will be so stunned by this, you will take your eyes off the leprechaun, and he's gone, disappears. See, he knows you're going to go for the precious gold coin. So it immediately disappears on you. It's magic. It's leprechaun money. Yes, indeed. So now that I've told you that, you're all going, thank you, Terry, because if I did run into a leprechaun, I guess I will get the silver coin because it's not going to disappear, right? You are correct. It is not going to disappear. As a matter of fact, when you use that coin, the silver coin, it is far more precious than a gold coin, because once you pay for something with that coin, it appears back in your pocket. Yep, you get possession of that coin as soon as you use it to purchase something. Isn't that marvelous? Yes, indeed. Oh, however, whatever you bought with that coin disappears shortly afterwards. Yes, indeed. So the leprechaun's got you either way. He's either going to torment you immediately or down the road. And yet you'll still have the silver coin, so you'll try it again and again and again. And each time you'll buy something with it, and it'll be whatever the value is that you have to buy something with. That's what the coin will be worth. And you'll purchase it, and you'll go to take it home. Coin goes back in your pocket, and the product you bought disappears. See what they're trying to do? They just try to torment you over and over and over again. Now, that leads me to a story. A wonderful story about a man who learned all of this. He researched it beyond belief. And he set out in his life to find a leprechaun and outwit that leprechaun himself. And I tell you this much, it was an amazing adventure that he went on. Now, he was married and had a small, little, humble house in Ireland, lived in the village itself. We're very familiar with the area and that. And he'd look constantly for leprechauns. And one day he had the pleasure of finally finding one. I won't go into great detail. I will tell you this much. He heard him hammering away underneath a bush, you see, right on the road, right on the path itself. And sure enough, he glanced down and he saw a bit of the leprechaun's red coat. They have red or they had green coats. That was denoted which family they were from. So he found the red-coated leprechaun, grabbed hold of him before the leprechaun could disappear on him, held him closely in his hand, and he looked at him and said, "I've got my eyes on you, Mr. Leprechaun, and sure as it is, you're going to give me 3 wishes. Now, don't go offering me any of your coins, because I ain't going to take a coin from you. I know the tricks that you have learned over the years. I also know, where all the pots of gold are in Ireland, and I'm not going to ask for that either. I just want enough to sustain me for the rest of my life and my family from that point forward. Yes, and I don't want any of your shenanigans to get in the way of this here thing. So you're going to have to tell me where that pot of gold is that would sustain me for this point forward. Now, be out with it. I don't want 3 wishes. I just want the one. So I will hold you here until you tell me so." And Leprechaun said, "Oh, I can't tell you anything about it." The Leprechaun says, "I'll tell you what, you sure you don't want, I'll give you both coins." "Yeah, don't be fooling with me there, fella. I'll give you immortality." "I don't want immortality. If you gave me immortality, I know what you do. You turn around and you'd kill everyone around me, and I'd be all by myself the rest of my life." "You think I haven't thought these things out? You see, I'm well aware of what you're up to here. So I told you already, all I want is to know where the pot of gold is that I can sustain myself and my family for the rest of my life in pleasure." He said, "I can't tell you." He says, "All right, this is going to be a matching of the wits, and it's going to take me some time to get this straight for you. So I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you back to my house." You see, and he takes him back to the house, and he ties him up in a nice tight rope and secures it and hangs it right over the fireplace, right over a boiling pot. And it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And the leprechaun says, "Oh, Faith, what you going to be doing to me here?" He says, "Well, if you don't come to the conclusion to tell me what I needs to know, then I'm going to have to dump you into this boiling hot water and cook you alive, man. And don't think I won't do it." He lowers the rope a little bit closer to the pot. And the leprechaun says, "Oh, sure, if you do that, then you're not going to find anything out. And I'll tell you what, me brothers and sisters from this point forward will come after you with all their might. They'll make everything just a hooly of a mess for you." And he says, "Don't be tricking like this. I know that you can't summon them all. I got you possessed here in my control. So you better concern yourself with giving me the truth." And the leprechaun holding out, and he says, "I can't tell you where any of it is. I can't tell you a thing, a lick." He says, "Oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can, and you will." He lowers the rope a little bit closer to the water. Oh, and the leprechaun's feet are dangling right above the bubbles, and it's getting hot, and he's sweating, and he's figuring every trick in the book he tries on him, and the man's not falling for any of it. The leprechaun finally realizes, "I've been outwitted by a human. Faith, I hope the rest of them don't find out about this, but I'm going to have to give up the secret to some of the gold." He says, I'll tell you what, my dear friend, you seem to be rather clever. So you said you'll need a pot of gold that'll sustain you for the rest of your life and your family as well. Well, I can look into the future and I realize you got a grand family coming before you. You're going to need a great sum of gold. And the only pot of gold large enough for that isn't even a pot of gold. It's a room full of gold. And as luck would have it, it appears only on rare occasions on a full moon. And tonight there'll be a full moon, so your luck is with you. Now, I'd like to show you where this gold is. I'd take you directly there myself if you'd just let me out of these ropes. And the man says, don't you dare say this to me. I know you'll find some way to trick me if we get out of here. You're going to stay secured right there. And I'm going to bring the cat in to watch you when I go out to find the gold, to make sure you didn't send me on a wild goose chase. You think you're going to outwit me, sir? You will not. Oh, the leprechaun says, you're just too clever for me, man. Oh, Faith, you're too clever. I'll tell you the whole thing. Just keep the cat away. I don't want to be someone's dinner. Yes, and oh heavens, make sure the rope is tight so it doesn't slip while you're gone. And I take a swim in the hottest springs I've ever seen. He says, all right, it's a deal. Now, where is this room of gold? Well, are you familiar with the land right outside of town? Yes, I am. What kind of Irishman would I be if I didn't know the land outside of town? So, well, not the first farm, not the second farm, but the third one down, the one nearest the creek. Yes, you take the main road out of town, not the first farm, not the second farm, but the third farm down. I'm well aware of where that is. Passed it many a time since I was a boy. Well, you walk there tonight at the dead of night, the darkest of night at midnight, when the full moon comes out, you walk right through the middle of that field towards the creek. And when the moon rays hit just right, it's going to expose a stairway. Now you walk down that stairway and it'll take you right towards the creek. And when you get to the bottom of the stairway, just a stone's throw away from the creek, you take to turn to the left and you knock on the wall, for there'll be a wall that appears there, and it'll be a door that opens up. And inside there will be all you need. Gold as far as the eye can see. Now you can take all the gold you want out of there, but make sure you're out of that door and room by the time the sun comes up. For once the sun starts to come up, it all disappears till the next full moon. And if you're inside the room, you'll never come out again. Oh, now I'm telling you, this is what you need to do. Well, the old man, he goes down there, he says, he leaves the cat watching the leprechaun. The old man goes down and he says, yep, first farm, second farm, third, yep, there it is. Walks through the middle of it and says, okay, it'll be somewhere around here. There's no sign of it now, but the leprechaun, he's going to be clever, but I've got it all staked out. It's just as he said it would be. So when the moon comes out, this is going to come down and we'll be all set to go. Yes, and now, what should I do while I wait? I'm getting a bit thirsty. Perhaps I should stop at the public house and quench that thirst of mine. So that's what he does. He goes down to the tavern and he has a couple of drinks and he's wetting his whistle, secured in the fact that the leprechaun is protected by the cat. He even sneaks back to the house, looks in the window. The leprechaun's right there. Yes, indeed. If he really was tricking him, he'd have disappeared or something like that, or tried something. But he didn't try anything, so he's all right. Yes. Now I'll go back to the public house and wait until it's just about time, and then I'll walk myself over to the field and I'll look for that stairway, and I'll make my way down those stairs, and that'll be that. Well, while he's at the public house, his wife, she's coming home, And doesn't she walk right by the public house, and doesn't she see him in there, and doesn't she see him having a drink or two, imbibing himself, and she doing all the work around the house? Well, 'tis no surprise to me what he's up to again. So she storms off home, and when she gets home, she can't believe her eyes. She sees the leprechaun dangling right over the fire, right there in front of the boiling water. And she says, "Oh, well, what to me eyes to see? I can't believe it. It's a leprechaun. Is it a leprechaun?" She says, "Yes, it is a leprechaun. And didn't I tell your husband where to find all the gold?" "Yeah, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I was going to keep it a secret." She says, "What are you talking about?" "The gold, woman. He's gone off to get the gold, so you'd all be happy and healthy the rest of your life, supported with all the wealth of the world. He outwitted me at every corner, and I'm here trapped until he comes back." "Yes, didn't he tell you about it?" "Well, no, I haven't seen him. He's not looking for gold. He's sitting in the tavern drinking, don't you know?" Oh, sure. I got it. Yes, I know what he did." "Now, what do you think he did?" says the woman. "Well, he probably found that gold, moved it, and now he's celebrating." "Yes, and here he told me he was doing this for his family, and he didn't tell you at all. Well, my goodness sakes alive. And here I was thinking I could trust him. Oh, good heavens. He didn't tell you about the gold. He's down there drinking. Well, I'd do something about that myself if I could. But here I am all tied up." And she says, "Oh, I'm going to do something about it. But what's this gold you're talking about?" It is gold. It shows up in the third field, third farm down the road, right by the creek. You walk through the center of the field, right down towards the creek itself. There's the pot of gold. Shows up. You probably took it. Did you? She says, "I came that way. There was no pot of gold out there." "Oh, yeah." So then he definitely took it. "Yes." Are you sure you were in the right field? Third field down, right by the creek. Walk right through the center of the field. Make your way about a stone's throw from the creek. There's the gold, just standing up there, bright as day. Perhaps you should go check again. Perhaps you should check. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was distracted at the tavern. Oh, I think he was distracted at the tavern. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to get that gold. And none of it's going to go to him. He can sit in that tavern, and that'll be the end of him. Whoosh, that'll be it. Yes. And you, sir, I'm so kind for you telling me what to do there. She says, "Oh, it's my pleasure. Always nice to help a fair woman like yourself. Yes. Perhaps you get rid of the old man and find yourself someone a bit better next time. What with all that gold, well, you'll have more than plenty of suitors." Yes. She says, "Yes, I will. Yes, indeed. Well, what can I do for you, Mr. Leprechaun, for helping me out?" She says, "Well, I'm afraid sooner or later I'm going to fall into this pot, and won't that be the end of me? And well, you'll have the gold and all. No way to thank me. I'll be gone." She says, "Whoosh, I'll tell you what, I'll let you go. You told me what I needed, and I'll let you go." And so she lets him go. And says, "I'm so gratefully thankful to you, my dear. If you need of anything, you just give a whistle, and I'll arrive for you, is what I will. So thank you, and best of luck to you and yours. Say hello to the old man." She says, "Oh, I will not. That fool is going to be in that tavern, and that'll be the end of it for him." So she walks down, sure enough, gets down that way, walking through the field, and the moon comes out. And it's a nice, bright, full moon. And she's looking around for the pot of gold, and she walks right to the top of the staircase. And doesn't she fall, bloom, 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 all the way down to the bottom of the stairs. Oh, don't worry, she didn't break her neck, but she didn't see it at all. Yeah. So, my goodness sakes alive. Oh, and she sprained her ankle or something. She's wailing and crying and moaning. And lo and behold, doesn't the old man come along really shortly after that? Because he knows there's supposed to be a staircase. Look at that. And here I thought he was lying to me. And there it is. Yes, indeed. But I outwitted him. I brought a wheelbarrow with me. Yep, he's got a wheelbarrow, so he can get all that money. And he goes to take the wheelbarrow down the stairway, and doesn't he hear a wailing cry? Oh, and a moan. And he recognizes that cry, and boom, it's the Banshee. Oh, sure, it's the Banshee, and it'll be the end of me. And he lets go of the wheelbarrow for fear that the Banshee's calling for him. And the wheelbarrow goes bloom, 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 right down the stairs. Boom, right onto the lady. Oh, now she's wailing even louder. And he looks around to find the Banshee, and he trips down the stairs. Boom, 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 crack, right on top of his wife. Breaks her leg clear in half. Oh, she's wailing beyond. And he goes, oh, it's not the Banshee. It's you, me dear wife. Yes. Oh, what are you doing here? She says, well, I'm suffering to no end right now is what I'm doing here. And for you, you fool, you threw a wheelbarrow at me, and then you come down yourself, and I'm right near, can't move my leg. I'm sure it's broken straight in half. What in thunderation are you doing? He says, well, it is here. I'm getting the gold for us for the rest of our lives. Yes, indeed. I was going to surprise you with it. The leprechaun told me all about it, and here it is. And don't you worry, I'll get it right now. And he knocks on the door, and sure enough, it opens up. He says, fear not, fear not. I'll get this. And she says, you'll do no such thing. You'll put me in this wheelbarrow, and you get me out so I can get this leg repaired, you fool. What do you think? Oh, my goodness sakes. And he goes, oh, you know, you're right. I'll do that. I'll put you in the wheelbarrow. I'll take you back up to the top of the stairs, and I'll get you to a doctor. I still got the leprechaun secured, so he can show me when it's going to come again. And she goes, well, yeah, you do that, will you? And so he puts her in the wheelbarrow. He wheels her back up the stairs, and he struggles to get her to home so he can summon the doctor. And he drops her right as he gets in the door, because he looks at the fireplace, and the leprechaun's gone. Faith, what happened? And she says, oh, well, I suppose I better tell you now. The leprechaun told me there'd be a pot of gold right there in the middle of the field. And so I went looking for it, because he said you didn't tell me. And so I got angry. So when I went looking for it, I fell down the stairs, and then you fell after me. And well, the whole thing is, I was so mad that I said I'd let him go if he told me where the pot of gold was. Oh, woman, you're a fool as every day you're old. Don't you know he did that to trick you? I was going to bring all the gold back and surprise you. We'd have all the gold we needed for a lifetime. She said, up. Don't worry. He said he'd so grateful he'd come whenever I call. And the old man says, okay, call him. She goes, here, leprechaun. Here, leprechaun. He doesn't answer. Of course he's not going to answer. You have to have his name. Did you happen to get the leprechaun's name, woman? No, I happened not to. Oh, you're a fool. And me studying for years to outwit the leprechauns, and you losing the whole opportunity just like that. She says, oh, whisk your mouth there, young man, because I'll tell you this right now. I was angry with you because there you were in the tavern celebrating yourself before you even got anything to celebrate about. He says, oh, well, there's no sense blaming either one of us. Immortal leprechaun has tricked us once again. But everyone in town knew from that day forward that they'd been tricked by a leprechaun, because that leg never healed right, and she walked with a limp. And that's a sure sign you tried to outwit a leprechaun if you walk with a limp. At least that's what they believe in Ireland. So don't try and outwit a leprechaun unless you want to be limping around the rest of your life. Now, I have to tell you something. When I told you that story, I mentioned another fairy, a relation to the leprechauns, the Banshee. The Banshee is a fairy like the leprechauns. It's a sprite. It's a fairy, and it's a misunderstood fairy. It is a fairy that summons and cries out. The truth is, it cries out when it knows someone is going to die. Now, the origin of the Banshee, the she is in there like the she leprechauns and the cluricans. The she is one as well, and that's the Banshee, or the Banshee as we know it. Now, legend has it that they started wailing for the O'Brien families, the O'Neill families, the O'Connor families, and the Kavanaghs. These were very prestigious clans in Ireland. And the Banshee did this as an honor to these honored families. What she would do is she would call out wailing, and that would be a warning to the head of the clan, someone was going to die. You see, because when someone died, you would have mourners come, or keeners as they call them, and they would keen for you. They would cry out. The more keeners you had, the more important and respected you were in the community, because everyone was so distraught that this person was gone. The Banshee, as a service to these prestigious families, would start keening or wailing before that person was dead, so that the head of the clan would know someone's going to die and have all your affairs in order. So she was not the death toll. She was wailing as a warning sign. So she didn't bring death. She just warned you death was coming. So she couldn't kill you. That's where she's misunderstood. Originally, she was considered a very beautiful young woman combing her hair. And she's still viewed in that image quite often. She's also more often viewed as an old, ugly hag combing her hair and wailing out. But now she's confused as the harbinger of death, as she is death itself. Instead of just calling out that death is coming, she is bringing death, kind of like the Grim Reaper. She is not the Grim Reaper. She cannot kill you. She just knows that death is coming. As a matter of fact, she will actually often summon the Coach of Bower, or the death coach. And that is guided by the Dullahan. Now, the Dullahan is actually the spirit that should get the reputation that the Banshee has. The Dullahan actually comes and summons the person who's dead or is about to die, and puts them in the death coach and brings them to the other world. Now, the Dullahan actually, sometimes in legend, is simply just on a horse, a black horse, riding. Cannot say anything but the person's name who's to die. And it's interesting because the Dullahan, his head is in his lap. It's not on his head. He's headless. As a matter of fact, the legends believe that his head is so grotesque, it looks like a wheel of moldy cheese with two piercing eyes. And the Dullahan will pick up the head in one hand and look around to find the person who's he's come to be dead with, bring to death. And the only words he will summon is that person's name. But if he's on the Coach of Bower, or the death coach, he will have another cool thing. He'll have his head in his lap as well, but he'll also have a whip for the horses, because now we'll have a team of horses, black horses, penetrating red eyes, flame coming out of their nostrils. And that whip is actually a whip of a human spine. And if anyone's foolish enough to look out their window when they've heard the Banshee and they know the death coach is coming by, he will whip towards you and snap at you, and it will blind your eyes. And if he doesn't use his whip, he's always got a bucket of blood that he will throw at you that will blind you as well. So if you are foolish enough to try and look for the Dullahan, lo and behold, you may be blinded. Unless he's calling your name, then you will be dead, because that's what happens with the Dullahan himself. Does that sound familiar? A headless horseman and a round object to look out at things? Of course it does. The Dullahan goes way back before Washington Irving and Sleepy Hollow. Irving had actually heard those stories of the Dullahan and wrote about them and Americanized them himself. The Dullahan gets his reputation of being headless because the Druid priests in the high rituals of sacrifice and the high holy masses of the pagan religion, they would sacrifice, usually Christians, and the messenger for the dead, the Dullahan, would actually come to tell them who to kill. They did it in honor of how they would kill these people, which was usually beheading. So the messenger of death became a headless individual, somebody who was to die. That would be the messenger that the Dullahan would send to the pagan Druid priests, telling them who was to be killed. And so that's how they end up with the headless horseman, the headless coachman. The Dullahan is literally the messenger for death itself, the spirit of death. And he took the form of what they did traditionally in their rituals, which was chop off someone's head. So that's how we get that whole reputation of him there. Those are a couple of different, a little bit scarier spirits, and maybe I should tell you about near Halloween, or as they call it, Samhain. But I like to throw them in there because they tie in with the nice leprechaun story I told you. So we've got a couple of the spirits there: leprechaun, churichan, the banshee, the Dullahan. Oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch more. But there is one I'd like to tell you. It's a friendly name spirit, the Puka. The Puka. The Puka is a spirit. It's a shapeshifter. Like many of these creatures are shapeshifters. It is a shapeshifter that often takes the form of a horse. A black horse will rise through the night, through your fields. And if you have upset the Puka, it will trample your crops and destroy them. It'll frighten your livestock so they give stillbirth, or your hens won't lay eggs. It will break open the fences and gates to release your livestock, all because you didn't give him his Puka share. The Puka share is literally what the ancient Celts and the pagans would do when they would harvest their crops. They would leave a portion in the field for the Puka, to please the Puka, hoping that it will give them another bountiful harvest the next year, and so that they can have livestock give birth, and hens lay fresh eggs, and their crops be bountiful. So they would do this on regular occasions. Now, when the Puka is not doing that, the Puka may come across you and sit down to talk with you. He loves the gift of gab, the Puka does, but he's always out to trick you as well. Now, one of the most famous stories of the Puka is how the Puka will appear to those who are coming home from the tavern late at night, and they'll be walking back to their house, and the Puka will come up in the form of a horse and start a conversation with the walking traveler. And the Puka will be kind enough in the conversation to offer them a ride. Now, no one in the right mind would give up the opportunity to get a free ride home. And so the weary traveler will hop on the back of the Puka, and the Puka will take off and jet out and race all through Ireland, across the sky, over the prairies, pastures everywhere, across the lanes, racing so fast that you cling on, fearing for your life. For fear, if you fall off, you'll break your neck and be dead. When the Puka has finished its ride, the Puka will literally stop, buck you off, and you will land in usually often in a ditch on the side of the road, nowhere near where you were walking before. But all the time, you will have the remains of the night's activities on your breath. In other words, they can smell it on you. You've been at the tavern. But often when you are discovered in these ditches, you will blame it all on the poor Puka. The Puka did this for a great long time throughout Ireland, tormenting people and taking, shall we say, imbibers for rides of a lifetime, leaving them stranded far from home, until one day he actually got a challenge from Brian Barrow, the first king of all Ireland, a hero to everyone in Ireland. Brian Barrow, he is the one who actually defeats the Danes and kicks them out of Ireland. Brian Barrow does a challenge with the Puka and takes a ride on his back. And he rides him for over 24 hours, exhausting the Puka. And the Puka surrenders to Brian Barrow and says he's met his match. And Brian Barrow says, now, because of this, I want you never again to torment the people of Ireland. And he looks at the Puka, and the Puka is very saddened by this. He says, however, I can't take all of that away from you. So here's what I'm going to do. You cannot take anyone in Ireland for a ride of their lifetime ever again. However, I will allow you to take any Irishman for a ride of a lifetime if they were foolish enough to leave this precious isle and decide to live somewhere else and call that their home. So if any of you out there are Irish, don't go talking to any horses, because the Puka has permission from Brian Barrow to take you for a ride of a lifetime and throw you off on the side of the road, far from home, but only after you've been to a tavern. So I'm trying to say, be careful out there, because Brian Barrow said that would be punishment for any Irishman who is foolish enough to leave the most heavenly on earth of all lands, Ireland, which ties right back into the leprechauns who found heaven on earth on the Emerald Isle itself. As long as we're talking about heroes like Brian Barrow, I got a few minutes before we'll go to question and answer. I'd like to tell you about a couple of other heroes, and one of them is Finn McQuail, or Finn McCool, depends on how you want to say it. Finn was a giant, literally a giant. He was just a massive man. He does a lot of heroic things. Probably one of the most famous heroic things he does is he defeats the fire-breathing goblin who keeps destroying the religious ceremonies, the Samhain. Samhain is actually the origins of Halloween, and it was a pagan ritual. A Druid priest would lead all these ceremonies, and the king of all Ireland would hold them on the sacred hill of Tara, and they would actually appease the gods so that they would have a shall we say, calm winter, because it's at this point the veil between this world and the next is thinnest, and it's when all the spirits come back and forth. And literally during these ceremonies, the people would dress up in costumes and disguises so that their relatives who have gone to the other world don't recognize them, because if they recognize them, they'll bring them back to the other world. Does this sound familiar? Of course it does. It's the origins of Halloween. That's why you put costumes on, not to scare those around you, but to fool the dead ancestors so that they don't welcome you back to their world, because this is when it's so dangerous a time. So the veil is so thin that people can travel back and forth. Well, for about 25 years, this fire-breathing goblin is coming through this veil on Samhain in the midst of their ceremonies, and he's burning all the sacred temples and all the buildings, and just destroying the land. He puts everyone to sleep, and then destroys everything. And when they wake up, it's just all ashes and ember. And so they've sent warriors after the demon and everything. Nothing works. This goblin is ferocious, and Finn McQuail is the one who actually defeats him. He defeats him because he's got the knowledge of all the world, because he captured the salmon of knowledge. Quick story about that. Salmon of knowledge has all the knowledge of the world, knows all the secrets of the world, knows how to do everything. Finn McQuail captures this fish, and he's got to get the knowledge out of the fish. So he figures, I'll cook it and I'll eat it. And he goes to cook it, and he puts it in a pan. It's such a large salmon, it's bigger than the pan. He throws some grease in there with it. The fish starts to flop around, the grease splatters, and it gets Finn right on the thumb. And he goes to suck his thumb to cool off the oil, and the fish flops out of the pan and gets back in the water and swims away. Finn, while sucking on his thumb, realizes that had the knowledge from the fish itself. Some of it got in the oil, and now it's on his thumb. And when he sucks his thumb, he gets all the answers he needs. So whenever he has a question, in goes his thumb into his mouth. And he does that to discover how to defeat the fire-breathing goblin. And he does that by sucking on his thumb and realizing this one warrior has a wonderful spear that's got a poison dart on the end of it. And he finds a way to use that dart, the spear, the tip of it, in two ways. One, to actually kill the goblin with a full thrust of the spear into him. But before that, he rubs his fingers on the end of that and gets some of the remains of the poison on there, and he gets it, and he puts it in his ears, and so he can't hear the song that the goblin plays off of Dagda's harp. That puts everyone to sleep. So he pretends like he's asleep, and the goblin's walking over to try and start the fire. And that's when Finn goes at him with the sword, with the spear, and gets him, kills him, and becomes a hero for all eternity from that point forward, being honored, all because he sucked his thumb to get the knowledge. But that's actually not the best story I wanted to tell you about Finn. The story I really want to tell you about Finn is when he decides he's going to challenge the giant of Scotland, just across the waterways. It was Antrim he was in, I'm not sure. And he builds a boulder walkway across the waterways so he can get over there to fight this giant. But when he gets close to where the giant lives, he sees him in the distance, and he starts to measure out, and he realizes this guy's like twice my size. There's no way I'll beat him. So he skedaddles back home, runs to his house, and tells his wife, Una, I made a big mistake. I said I'd wrestle this guy, and I can't fight him because he's like twice my size. There's no way I could beat him. I'm strong, I'm brave, I'm put, and it's not going to work. And Una says, shut up, get over here. She takes a tablecloth and she's stripped down, and she puts the tablecloth on him like a diaper. And she says, go over there and curl up on the bed like a cradle. And go ahead, suck your thumb. And sure enough, when he starts doing that, the giant from Scotland comes over, and the giant peers into the house looking for Finn and says to Una, I'm here to wrestle and fight your husband. And she says, oh, he's not home right now. Only thing is our newborn baby's here. And he looks over at Finn, and he sees this newborn baby sucking his thumb. And the giant says, did I say I came to wrestle him? Oh, I'm all mistaken, ma'am. Please forgive my interruption. And he races back the other way. And as he runs across that walkway that Finn made, he pulls up the boulders and he throws them against the cliff itself so that it can separate the two with the causeway itself. Hopefully never to be challenged by Finn because he retreated. You see, because he thought, if that's his son, I don't want to know how tall and big and large Finn McQuail is. And so Finn gets credit for defeating this giant of Scotland, when in truth, it was his wife, Una, who did all the thinking. Even though Finn had all the answers in his thumb, he didn't figure that one out. It took the brains of a woman. Well, listen, before we finish up here with some of my spirits and some of my sprites and the fairies, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you at least one story about St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland himself. Patrick had heard many of these stories. He knew all about the leprechauns. He knew how they hid out in the bushes. He knew all about the Dullahan. He knew all about the Banshee. He knew about the Coach-a-Bower. He knew about Finn and Brian Barrow. He knew all these things. He spent 6 years there as a slave. See, St. Patrick wasn't Irish. He was actually Italian, Roman to be specific. His father was a tax collector in what would become Wales, bordering with Scotland. And he was captured by the Irish and brought to Ireland to be a slave, where he was a slave and a shepherd for 6 years up in the hills for the chieftain that had taken him. Now, most of the slaves are protected because they're right there with the village, but the shepherds aren't. And this is what frightened Patrick, who at the time was known as Maewyn Succat. And he was worried because he knew that they knew he was Christian. Little side note, he was Christian, but he never practiced his faith. His grandfather was a priest, his father was a deacon, and he wanted nothing to do with the Christian religion. Kind of ironic. As a teenager, he totally abandoned his religion, and he says that he committed a sin that he was so apologetic for that he feels that's why he was captured and made a slave for so many years. It was punishment for the sin he had committed, and he promised never to commit again. So while he was up there in the hills, he worried for his life because he knew the Druids and the pagans had different ceremonies and rituals. He learned about all of them, the sacredness of this, that, and the other thing, the spirits that control your life, and the trees and the rocks and the rivers, even the preciousness of the shamrock, which was used in many of their religious ceremonies. He was also aware that in some of these ceremonies, they sacrificed not Puka shares of crops, but greater sacrifices to more important gods like the sun god and the moon god. And in those, they sacrificed human beings, hence the Dullahan or Dullahan stories, where they would kill someone. And the people they would kill, I believe I told you earlier, were the Christians. And so they would look for Christian slaves to sacrifice in these different ceremonies. Now, Patrick's up in the hills, or as I should say, Maewyn is up in the hills, unprotected by the chieftain. So he fears that someday they're going to come for him. And what happens is when they're going to do these sacrifices and they're going to do these rituals, the Druid priest will adorn themselves in blue. They'll paint their whole body blue, and then they'll put different symbols and figures on their body, on their chest and that. One of the most popular is a coiled up serpent looking to pounce with its mouth open and its tongue coming out, and very intimidating, fangs if possible, very frightening image on the priest's chest. So he starts having dreams about the blue man, and the blue man is a Druid priest coming to kidnap him and use him in a sacrifice. And that's when he finds God, because he'll wake up from these dreams and he will literally talk to God, his form of praying. And he finds whenever he does that, he calms down, he finds peace with himself and serenity, and figures whatever is going to happen is going to happen. God's going to take care of me. He starts praying to God, even not when he's having dreams, but when he wakes up in the morning, during the day, when he goes to bed at night. He spends all this time conversing with God, and he finally finds the faith that his father and his grandfather had had. And that's what actually sends him on a journey through a dream that God sends him to find a ship to get back to his family. And that's a whole nother story. I'll tell you what, he does find his family, but not back in Wales area, but in France, because they moved because of all the raiding that was going on from the Irish people. The Roman Empire was falling, and so the soldiers were being called back, so there was no one there protecting the Roman citizens. So lo and behold, they started moving closer to Rome. He doesn't know this, and he ends up in a foreign land in France and finds his family and rejoices and decides to honor God by becoming a priest, becomes a priest. And when he's going to be made a bishop, he has a dream before he sees the Pope. And in the dream, he sees a book that says victorious, and he opens the book and there's no words, just people calling out, come back, we need you, come back to us, please. And they say Patricius, and it is a Latin translation of Father of our people. So he tells this to Pope Clementine I, and the Pope says, take the name Patrick, and you will be the father of your people. And he says they were speaking Gaelic. So the Lord has told me I am the father of the Gaelic people, or the Irish. And he goes back on a missionary adventure that lasts anywhere from 28 years to 60, depending on which historical account you're going to go by. Patrick ends up dying when he's 76 or about 105, something like that along the way. But that's how he gets the name Patrick, is from this dream. And that's how he gets back to Ireland and starts talking to them about their religion, because he knew it, and showing them the similarities between their religion and Christianity, and lets them over time decide for themselves with free will whether they want to be pagans or Christians. And because he doesn't threaten or push them, this is how these things tend to go. And they, with free choice, start becoming Christians. By the time Patrick is finished as a bishop of Ireland and he passes on, 95% of Ireland will have converted to Christianity because of the way he went about it. No one had ever done it that way before. The Druid Chieftains, the Druids and the Chieftains, many of them converted without force. Some fought against him, and that's how a lot of the legends grow. But eventually, they were pushed off to the side if they believed in paganism and not Christianity. So when they tell you that Patrick chased all the snakes out of Ireland, you can tell them, do you know how many snakes were in Ireland when St. Patrick came there? The answer is none. Zero. Not a one. Zero, completely. It's an island that didn't have reptiles on it. So there were no snakes. But what was it that those Druid priests drew on their bodies? Serpents with their mouths open and a forked tongue coming out. So basically what they're saying when they say Patrick chased the snakes out of Ireland or drove the snakes out of Ireland, they mean he chased paganism out of Ireland and got people to convert to Christianity. So it's an interesting story, and it's nice to know the meaning behind it, because a lot of stories of Patrick, not as much clear cut as that one is in its meaning and symbolism along the way. But what he did do was he learned from the legends and the beliefs of the people of Ireland. He never denied the beliefs in leprechauns and banshees and Dullahans and Pukas. He never denied any of that, but he showed how his religion could explain away a lot of those things. Or he basically said, I believe in a religion that doesn't scare you into doing what they want, but enlightens you and makes you feel better for doing what our religion wants. And it worked. And it worked for the people. The stories I told you are all funny and humorous and clever, but they were meant to scare people into doing certain things along the way. Some of the great stories of leprechauns are magnificent with how they would trick people. They are Rod Serling's Twilight Zone before it was ever written. The leprechaun never was doing anything to really help you. And the better he could make you feel tricked and miserable, the happier he was, because they had no use for humans, even to this very day. So watch it if you find a leprechaun. Now, on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up for a Q&A from the audience. Any questions you have, or perhaps a quick story I reminded you of or something of that nature. I'll be more than happy to join you in on that, because after all, I got my Irish with me. So I've got the gift of gab going. Even without kissing the Blarney Stone. Any questions from anyone out there?
Go ahead and toss any questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
While we're warming up to see whether or not we want to tell any stories, I will tell you this one. One of my favorite St. Patrick stories is about him wrestling a giant black pig that the people of Monaghan believed was the devil in the form of a black pig, Puka, that was destroying their crops for like 7 years. And they challenged Patrick to get rid of it. And he said he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do anything. And he went on his way, but he asked where the pig had been living. And then legend has it, he went out, wrestled the pig, came back to them. And they said, did you get rid of the pig? He says, I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't think you'll have any more problems. See, because if he would have said he did wrestle the pig, he would have been acknowledging their pagan religions and beliefs, not Christianity. However, he said, I don't think you'll have any troubles from here on out. The next year, they have a bountiful harvest, a lot of children born, the livestock are doing great and everything. So they assume it was Patrick wrestled the pig, but he doesn't want to take credit for it. And it gets even pushed more into the front when a farmer finds a stone, a black stone with 2 hoof prints and 2 human prints in it by the riverbank itself when the waters recede. And they're positive that that's where he wrestled the pig, and the devil transformed himself into a rock instead of being defeated by Patrick. And the Black Rock of Monaghan is still there. And the legend grows of Patrick wrestling the black pig of Monaghan. I find that humorous because my mother's maiden name is Monaghan. And so I always like to put that story in there somewhere in honor of my mother.
My parents always, Jimmy Stewart was a Puka.
Yes, in Harvey. Harvey, the giant rabbit, the 6-foot rabbit, was a Puka in the form of a giant rabbit. Yeah. And it's interesting, the Puka will carry on great long conversations with you. And if you're intelligent enough to capture his attention, he may not torment you, but he'll just suddenly disappear. Many houses in Ireland would have a stool on the right side of the door that was more ornate than a stool on the left side of the door. enticing the Puka to sit to the right, and then they would take the seat to the left. If a Puka sat on the seat to the left, he was a mischievous and troublesome Puka. Again, the left-right thing, right being good and left being bad. They truly believed that. And so they would always have a nicer stool so the Puka would be happy if it came and sat there. And that was when it would take the form of a rabbit, would hop up and sit and talk to you. What's amazing is no one ever questioned these animals talking to them and then being able to understand the animals. And then suddenly at the end, they would discover that it was a Puka. Although they could have had a conversation for an hour with it, they didn't realize it until after the fact. So, but it makes for good stories. Makes for good stories.
We have a lot of thank yous coming through the chat. Everyone,
my pleasure.
Stories. And then we had a really good question come in. Did any of the wee folk come to the US with the Irish immigrants?
No, they are to live only in Ireland. That was part of their punishment, was they were allowed to find one place and only one place to live, and because that had to be their heaven on earth. So why would you leave your heaven on earth? That is a reoccurring theme, and you see that in Brian Barrow and the Puka, saying that you can punish Irish people who were foolish enough to leave Ireland. So you can ride them off and buck them off far from home, but you can't torment the people of Ireland. The same thing happens with the leprechauns. They technically are not allowed to leave their native land of Ireland itself. So I think some legends have stretched it away a little bit or incorporated their own fairies here, as we did with the Headless Horseman, and that takes some of those legends and move them out for you. It's very interesting. That reminded me of one other thing that I tell at Halloween time. Dracula. The origins of Dracula actually go back to a vampire in Ireland as well. A story that was told and is based around Waterford and where Bram Stoker actually grew up. And it's not a man, but a woman who comes and sucks the life out of people, but for a whole different reason. She was tormented by her husband and had a true love that she couldn't marry because it was an arranged marriage. And she dies because she refuses to eat. She's buried, and her husband, who was a greedy old miser, doesn't even put stones on her grave, which they believe if you don't put stones on the grave, the body and the spirit are allowed to wander and roam because you haven't sealed them down in the ground. A year later to the day, the lover that she wanted to marry couldn't, was there honoring her by her gravesite when she comes out of the ground because she had the power to come out. And she goes and kills her father and her husband by sucking their life out of them, draining them of all their blood, and then doesn't do the true love. But from that point forward, young men traveling by this cemetery are approached by a beautiful woman, and they end up dead on the side of the road because she sucks the life out of them from their neck, because they believe that's how her husband killed her, by draining the blood out of her neck, by slitting her throat. So she gave it back to him. Bram heard that growing up as a kid, turns it into the magnificent story Dracula down the road. So a lot of these things we talk and we've Americanized and put to other areas can be traced back to a lot of these legends from Ireland. And a lot of them are based in really scary things that we move about a bit. There are some spirits like the fire-breathing goblin and others like Sean Red, who are really, really monstrous. And those all stem around Samhain, which becomes Halloween. So you can trace them back there to the wee folk and the sprites and fairies.
Someone commented in the chat, we keep building traps here for the leprechauns, though, which I remember doing as a kid.
Yes, we do. And you never catch them, do you?
Nope.
I've heard that a lot, and I think it's a wonderful way of incorporating the Irish legends in that. But just don't tell them. Well, is it the truth that they can't leave Ireland. Oh, no, I believe in leprechauns as well. No, I do. But I think it's a great tradition to hunt for leprechauns and that. But the real history of them is they can't leave the island of Ireland.
We got more thank yous coming in. Someone said, I think the leprechauns are here because our whiskey goes missing.
Those are the Churicans. They're the cousins of the leprechauns. And there are several others beyond that. In several books I've looked at, I didn't realize they have different offshoots, and most of it's based on what their specialty is. But the most popular are the leprechauns. But there are other ones like the Churicans, and there are a couple of others that trace back to ancient tribes and the histories of Ireland, dating way back. The Irish harp is great with that. Dagda's harp has a whole tradition of different spirits behind it. And they're all different offshoots of the sprite and the fairies. Leprechauns are technically fairies. They're technically fairies, but they're called the wee folk. They're called the little people. And then if you want to generalize them, but if you want to get special, you can call it a leprechaun or churican. I wish I could come up with a couple of the others, but they're all offshoots, and they're supposedly different branches of the same family. I'm going to get another quick drink of water.
We had a comment or a question come in. Can we do another to hear more stories or book recommendations?
There are a couple of nice books on it. There is a book, I don't know the publisher of it, but it's Irish Legends and Stories, and it's all on leprechauns and fairies. And it's, I wish I had the publisher's name here. And there's another one on Celtic ghost stories that is really good around Halloween time. I should have looked up the two for the publishers on them. The one on Irish legends and stories of the leprechauns, there are a lot of short stories, quick little ones you can tell, about 150 to 200 little stories. It's a thick book. It's a thick book, but it is available. I should have written down who published it. But look at your library. I bet you they have a couple. Irish folklore is another one that will tie in a lot of these legends, a lot of the undertones of the histories of these different creatures in it as well in the Irish folklore, because they'll explain it in a lot of the stories, the origin stories of these different beings, basically beings, immortals. And there's a lot of them in Ireland because they believe everything had a spirit protecting it. Trees, flowers, grass. The shamrock, which actually becomes very well known with St. Patrick and the Trinity, was used in a lot of Druid ceremonies. That's why he used it. That was one of the reasons he took a symbol of theirs, a very sacred symbol, and gave it new meaning. And pretty much the secret of him converting to Christianity was taking a lot of their Druid symbols and pagan symbols and giving them new meaning with Christian, relevance behind them. The Celtic Cross, he designed the Celtic Cross to replace a Druid column, which was called a standing rock or a sun rock, a sun column. And it was basically a column with a circle at the top with the center carved out. And on certain days of the year, the sun or the moon would align right to come right through that hole, and they would have a ceremony based on that. It was basically a time marker, like Stonehenge and other things. And he would go to these ceremonies and see all this relevance in that, and he'd never deny any of it. But then he started coming up with the idea of talking about how we look to an image similar to that to honor my God and the way he died, called the crucifix. And he showed him the crucifix, and then he incorporated it into the stone column and put the cross in front of the standing stone and married them together, putting the circle behind the cross or the crucifix. And so they could look at their pagan symbol and a Christian symbol combined and use what they can from the both. And it's a very popular cross, the Celtic cross with the Irish people. And that's how he came about with it. And that's how he did a lot of those things. Take their pagan symbols and incorporate some Christianity into it.
Well, it looks like that's everything that's come through the chat.
Excellent, excellent. Well,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much for presenting tonight. That was excellent. I love the stories.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was truly my pleasure. I enjoyed it as well. I had a great time. And for those of you still out there, this is water I'm drinking, by the way. Check out the library. I'm sure they have some great books in there, and they're wonderful stories. And it's amazing how often they tie into things we think about now from other places. So thank you so much for having me out. I had a great time.
You're welcome. And thank you for presenting. And thank you everyone for coming.
My pleasure. We'll see you next time.
Have a good night.
Take care. Have a good one.
Good night.